Okay, we are off and running. Welcome to the, I'm not sure which number Parlor Car Chat that we've done so far. Today's topic is, well, first of all, this first screen, just to remind everybody, this is a program of the San Luis Obispo Railroad Museum. Parlor Car Chats, we do these typically on Saturday mornings every once in a while. The screen is there to also remind you that there's a way on the website to make a donation to the museum. Obviously, they've kind of had zero income since all this COVID stuff started. So if you feel motivated to help them out during this zero income period for them, that would be great. And also, if you want to find future Parlor Car Chats, there's a link to the Parlor Car Chat page right there on the home page. Okay, today our topic, and I'm very excited about this, is circus trains. And I got to thank Diane Marchetti for dropping the idea. She just said once that, you know, that would be an interesting topic. And it just opened up a whole world for me because of a friend of our family's, church friend, all that, going back quite a ways when Kelly Ballagh, who you're going to meet in a minute, was part of our youth group's puppet troupe at the church 15, 20 years ago. I'm not exactly sure. Anyway, Kelly ended up becoming a circus clown with the Ringley Brothers and Barnum and Bailey group and spent 7 years on the red and blue unit trains going around the country performing in the circus as a clown. So I'm going to see if I can get Kelly on here just a second and let him introduce himself. Okay, okay, Kelly, take it away.
Hello.
Say hi to everybody.
Happy Halloween, everybody. Happy Halloween. Thanks for joining the trains. Yeah, so like Jamie said, we go back many, many years. I don't want to date it. I don't want to figure out exactly how many years. It's probably at least 20 plus years. So
I know.
So we go back many, many years. Before I even got into clowning, we were doing puppetry at the First United Methodist Church in Arroyo Grande, California. And through my adventures with puppetry, that led me to running into circus clowns, literally running into circus clowns from Ringley Brothers, and having a conversation with them through my puppet troupe that I was traveling the United States with. Because I traveled for 3 years with Puppet Productions based out of DeSoto, Texas, which is a Christian-based puppetry and training program that goes around the United States and would teach puppeteers how to be better performers and would teach curriculum. And I was with that troupe, which we were in Dallas-Fort Worth when the circus came to town, and we got together just as a gathering with the clowns from the circus, and they expressed interest in looking for new clowns, and I ran away and joined the circus. You hear that saying all the time, but I actually really did. Yeah, I applied and showed them what I could do, and they liked what I had to offer, so they brought me on the road. And I joined Ringley Brothers at the end of 2000, right going into November is when I joined with them in Chicago, and then finished up the last 2 months of the year there, then came back and started my full year in 2001 and ran that all the way through 2007. But like Jamie said, I was actually on both units. There's actually 3 units of Ringley Brothers, or there used to be. There used to be the red, the blue, and then the gold. The gold unit was the smaller shows that would play smaller arenas, ones that didn't have big arenas or didn't have the spacing to be able to hold the bigger show. They could have a smaller show, a one-ring show, and that's where the gold unit came from. But I never traveled with the gold. I traveled with the red and the blue, and crisscrossed the United States for 7 years on the Silver Snail, the Ringley Brothers and Barnum and Bailey train. And it was an adventure, and then some, which I think we'll talk about in the next hour. So I'm not going to give too much away.
Yeah, that's a great segue. So, okay, let me put the slides back up. And you and I should still have open mics, so we're good to go. And let's see if that worked. Ta-da! There it
is. Look at that. Hey, it's my room again.
The view of Kelly's office without Kelly in it.
Yes, see, there's the photo of it, and then behind me is the live view of my same room. My wife and I call this room the clown room because, as you can see, there's clown and puppet paraphernalia everywhere, and I have this is something that I actually, breaking off on a tangent for a second. Steve Smith, who was the dean of Clown College for many, many years for Ringley Brothers, he used to always invite us over at Christmas time because when we were in winter quarters for the circus, we'd actually have winter quarters in Tampa, Florida, and that was about a 4-month process of building the new show, putting the show on its feet, getting all the props and costumes ready. And Steve lived in Sarasota. And so we'd go visit Steve in, on either Thanksgiving or Christmas. We'd go to his house, and his office was adorned with little knickknacks and little keepsakes that he had that he just, reminded him of being a kid. And so I took that example and ran wholeheartedly with it when I got my own house. And so I have knickknacks in the clown room that some things are things that I still use, the puppets and clown props, but then there's other things that are like the elephant headdress that you see in the picture. It says "Greatest Show on Earth" is actually a headdress from the circus, from one of the elephants that I rode in the few times that I actually had to ride an elephant. So I have that, but I also have like my steamer trunk and other props and keepsakes from my time on the road. But then there's other little knickknacks, little figurines and stuff that of movies or characters that I like, and so I have them again as keepsakes to remind me of my youth. Because I'm 45, and so I have to remember that I'm 45, and I'm still a kid at heart. So, but yes. So the clown room, Becky and I, my wife Becky and I, have our second guest room is the clown room where we have all of our costumes and all of our knickknacks and stuff, as you see. And so the door stays closed. When people come over to the house, they can see a normal house, but if they want to see the clown room, we open the door and they walk in and they get immersed in this lovely world of clown, puppet, and everything else that it could be. But it's fun. People love coming in. They say it's a museum. Okay, Becky comes in, and when Becky comes in, she always sees something new in the room, too. She always spots something new that I put up, and so it's an ever-growing exhibit.
That keeps it challenging.
It does.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to go real quickly through some history of Circus Train, which you can see the first picture of here, a steam locomotive. I'm not sure the era, but we've got a whole load of circus wagons on those flat cars back there. And we're going to go through these, and Kelly will jump in if he wants to comment on any of these. But then we'll get to the bulk of it, which is more current, at least in the sense of Kelly's tenure on the train, and talk a lot about that. So
I'd say, looking at that picture right there, I'd say it's probably early 1900s because of those telephone poles.
Yeah, there you go. And there's just another fun shot that I caught somewhere. Obviously, older as well. You notice that the boxcar is wooden.
And actually, in a little bit of clown history, this is Luke Jacobs, who very, very famous Ringling Brothers clown, actually very famous circus clown in general. He was, a master clown, and the things that he did and the things that he taught were passed on through generations. And he taught at Clown College when Ringling Brothers Clown College was around. He taught there and taught the old style of circus clowning, but a true legend in all senses of the word. And so, of course, you see the picture here. He was in a lot of publicity pictures, especially during his era, because he really, truly was the face of clowning for Ringling Brothers for all those years. It was Lou and Emmett Kelly that really epitomized circus clowning in the broader sense of the community. You had Felix Adler, and you had Mark Anthony, and those clowns that were circus clowns that people knew, but in the broader sense of just people who maybe didn't know circus per se would recognize Lou and their faces because they were so iconic.
Cool.
And his shoes were really not that big. The shoes are closer than his head, so.
And here's another older shot, again, more wooden cars, so it dates it of the elephants who you will see later were still riding the train up until the end.
And you can see behind all the people, too, they're looking at the elephants, but behind them, all those poles right there, those are actually for the tent, because Ringling Brothers used to perform in the tent. And so when it was in a tent, those were the tent poles and everything that would hold the tent in place, the main post. And, again, everything traveled on the train for the most part. There were a few things that maybe went overland, but for the most part, everything went on to the train, performers, animals, all the props, all the wagons that housed all the things that made up the greatest show on earth. And they would travel from town to town on the rails, and when they show up, they'd unload the animals like this and have a big ballyhoo parade down the main street of the town, pretty much promoting that the circus was in town. It's here. The show's arrived. Come watch the show. Come see the circus. What better way to tell people the circus is here than to have 20-some elephants walking down the road? Come on.
Speaking of elephants, there's another shot of
there they are again.
Showing them off, I suppose. And some of the circus
and this is probably when they unloaded them again, because what they would do is they would unload them in the train yards. They would find a location that was closest to the arena, or in those days where the tent was going to be set up. The closest location would be where they would unload the elephants and the animals, and then they would unload them in the train yard and then walk them from that place to the actual venue itself. So they have them all lined up, they're ready to go, and then there's actually spectators that are there to see them because, again, it's just one of those things. You don't see it every day. And so when the circus comes to town, you come out. It's a family holiday. You come out and you watch the circus come to town.
This slide I threw in just to make people aware that there was more than one circus organization back in the day. Quite a few of them, actually. They kind of eventually all merged up into the one or two that were left at the end. But there's one on the lower left, Cole Brothers Circus. I think we'll hear that word or name again. Spark Circus in the upper right-hand corner. So there's a lot of Ringley and Brothers, Barnum and Bailey weren't the only circuses in town.
No, they were the granddaddy, but I mean, and still to this day, even though Ringling Brothers closed down a few years back, there's still shows that are going around. Like, yeah, you got Cole Brothers, you got Clyde Beatty, you have Circus Vargas, you have Circus Vasquez. There's a lot of shows that are still out there going around. And the interesting thing, actually, with some of the older shows, you had Hagenbeck and Wallace, which was one of the shows back in the old days. Well, when they closed down, Ringling Brothers actually acquired them and turned them into their prop shop. So for Ringling Brothers, for Feld Entertainment, when they were creating the new shows, the department that was creating the new props and the floats and all those things was Hagenbeck and Wallace, which was an old circus show. So even though the shows may have closed down, the name and legacy still carried on, and that was one of the ways that Ringling Brothers truly honored them. You also had Sells Floto, which was the concessionaires on the concourse selling the programs and knickknacks. Sells Floto was also another circus that was around during the heyday. And then, like I said, when they closed down, they transformed into the concessions for Ringling Brothers.
This looks like the maybe the Barnum headquarters CEO type car.
I'd say so. It's either the management or it could also be the publicity car too, because they would have publicity. Let me try that again. Publicity that would go out ahead of the show, and so of course you'd have a car that was elaborately decorated, really promoting the circus coming to town. But this could also be when the owner traveled with the show. The owner had their own private little car that was decked out like a New York apartment kind of. I mean, just really, really fancy and swank. If you see the movie Water for Elephants, the owner of that show, his car, when they go inside there and you kind of see how his car's laid out, that's kind of how the cars were laid out for the owners and general managers and people that ran the show back in the heyday back then. Just really elaborate wood and decor and just, really decorated to the nine.
And lest we think that circus trains only ran in the United States, here's a picture of a circus train pulled up underneath the Eiffel Tower or at the Eiffel Tower station. You can see the wooden cars off to the right, and it looks like they've already started the unloading process of the animals here. I'm not sure the date of this, but it's pretty old.
Yeah, as I say, it looks pretty dated from the graininess.
Oh, actually, I have a note here. 1901.
Well, there we go. That is definitely dated.
That's pretty old.
Over 100 years old.
This one is 1909. And the note I made for myself on this picture, I'm not sure why I chose this one, but it was interesting that the Circus Train folks, the people who ran the Circus Train, got so good at it that the U.S. military came to the circus people to figure out how to run trains efficiently when they were transporting not clowns and animals, but soldiers and tanks.
Well, and to elaborate on that a little bit more, what it really was, what was not just running the train, but it was the effect that when the circus would come to town, you had a very set schedule where you'd arrive, you'd unload, set everything up, and be ready to go by showtime. And it's that old, the postman saying, neither rain nor sleet nor snow will slow us down. It's the same thing with Ringley Brothers, too. Nothing will slow you down. You may show up 10 hours later than you were planning to, but the show will still go on. The show will always be up. And so the U.S. military actually came to study and learn from the circus their efficiency in getting things moved and set up and transporting from one location to the next. They wanted to learn that efficiency, be able to speed up the process, which then would be able to help them in what they were doing, especially during the war effort, trying to get from point A to point B in the least amount of time and be able to get set up for whatever they needed to do. So it was definitely one of those training things that, again, you come to the circus to learn trapeze and high wire and acrobatics, or to how to be timely with your military setup.
There you go.
But actually, and the cool thing with that too, those wagons that were back in the back were part of the menagerie, where in the older days, when it was a tent show, you could actually come and you'd be able to see the animals up close in those wagons. But then during the ballyhoo processional from the train to the actual performance grounds, those wagons would get pulled down the parade route, and so along with the elephants and the other animals, you would have these decorated wagons that were getting pulled, and there'd be performers on them or animals in them, and it was a true parade. I mean, it really was a parade to promote the show was in town. And now up in Baraboo, Wisconsin, at the Circus World Museum, they actually have a lot of the old wagons that are still on display that you can see. They've been restored. And in Madison, Wisconsin, or not Madison, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, they used to do a big circus parade, and they would bring the wagons from Baraboo, Wisconsin to the parade and have them in the parade and really put on what you used to see in the old days of the circus coming to town. They'd put that kind of parade on with these floats and people riding on the floats and the animals and the marching bands and all that grand spectacle that really made it what it was.
And here's some more spectacle, unloading elephants.
Those little kids, that little girl could care less. The little boys are like, hey, look, an elephant. She's like, whatever.
Whatever.
I've seen it before.
My shoelaces are untied.
Yeah.
Obviously, I chose a lot of elephant photos. I'm not sure quite how that worked out, but there you go. Still old boxcars, wooden boxcars, basically. Oh, and here we go. Here's the setup. This photo was 1970, and just give you a little history. For some reason, I put it on this note. About 1840s is when circuses began using the rail. 1840s. I mean, that's a while ago. Mostly for limited distance and some other stuff. In the 1870s is when Barnum started using piggybacks, where you put truck trailers on flat cars. By the 1890s, Barnum and Ringley separately were moving whole circuses on rail, and in 1907 is when Ringley bought Barnum. Originally, after the purchase, you might say, they continued to operate separately, but by 1919, they were one circus, the Ringley Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Circus, and that's when things started to look like this, when the train would get to town and get the circus set up in the arena. And I think is this a preparatory kind of shot, or is this actually the show happening, Kelly?
This looks like it's probably the show happening, and it's actually, because it's 1970, is actually in the arena too, because like we were talking about a few minutes ago, Ringley used to be in the circus tent and was in the circus tent for many, many years, but then Of course, many people have probably heard of the Great Hartford Fire, which is the circus tent catching fire in Hartford, Connecticut. And the circus tent lasted, the era for Ringley lasted a few years longer, but then they moved to the arena mainly because when you're performing in a tent, you can only perform certain months because of the weather outside. So you can only perform maybe 9 months a year. But they had the great idea that if we move inside of an arena that's weather controlled and climate controlled, we can perform more. We can get more bodies in the seats. We can have more shows with more bodies, which means more revenue and more profit coming in. And so they actually moved to arenas where they could house they could house more people. They could have more people in attendance. But then also, like I said, they could add on a few more months where it may be snowing outside or really bad weather, but that doesn't affect the show because the show's inside. And then also you have the electricity and all the things that the arena has at your advantage. You have the bathrooms, you have the concession stands, you have the electricity for the lights and the power and stuff. So all that stuff made it more beneficial to move inside of an arena. And so when they did that, there was no looking back. I mean, the Gold Show did a few tent show days where they were promoting the tent, and so they actually had a tent that they were in. And Feld Entertainment had a show called Kaleidoscape for a while that was actually a tent show that was in New York for a while. But those have just been little pop-up things here and there. For the majority of the time that Ringley was around, later in the years, it was arena shows.
Here's a car that's being restored, actually. Not exactly restored. This is an interesting process for museum and modeler and restoration types. This circus car is undergoing digitization by the University of Southern Florida. And apparently the situation, if I understood it correctly, is that the car is not able to be restored in the sense of operable or even viewable by lots of people, so they're digitizing it and will somehow make the car available to the masses via some sort of virtual experience that you can quote-unquote walk through the car. I thought that was kind of interesting.
That's pretty cool.
Here's some couple of books, and we'll have links to these all these things, actually. If we talk about YouTube videos or if we talk about various things, there will be a lot of links on the Parlor Car Chat for this session after I get the video and get that all posted, including links to find these two books if you're intrigued. I think this, Kelly, is one of those advanced cars that you mentioned earlier that went ahead of the Circus Train promoting.
That's what it looks like. Oh, yeah, because you can see it at the very far end. It says the World Fair. So it was probably a circus train that went to the World's Fair to promote the circus.
Oh, there you go.
And this is still Barnum and Bailey, Greatest Show on Earth. So the Ringling Brothers hadn't been associated with it yet. It was still just Barnum and Bailey's show.
Did that notion of an advanced car continue up until the end or close to it?
So it just changed where you used to have the advanced cars, and some of the other shows that are out there that we were talking about have advanced performers that go ahead of the show and promote the show coming to town. Ringling was a little different, where Ringling, instead of having they had the advanced cars like this for many, many years, and then they created an advanced program where they had 2 or 3 clowns that would go out ahead of the show that were former clowns that were on the road, and they would promote the show coming to town. They'd do news and shows, and then that grew from only a few clowns to the later years where they actually would hire the former clowns that were on the road that had just come off. They would hire them to be advanced clowns, where you would fly out about a month before the show would come to town, and you do news and radio and special appearances and performances just as yourself or maybe you and your partner would perform. And so when I came off the road, so I was on the road for 7 years, and I did advanced work for 8 years. So I actually did advanced work more than I did time on the road.
Oh,
and
wow.
That was just traveling around, going from, every month I'd fly somewhere, and I'd have a few days in a city to promote, and I'd come home for a few weeks, and I'd fly somewhere else. and it really was just promoting. It was promoting the ticket sales and promoting the circus coming to town and talking about the new things that the show had to offer. So the same kind of premise as the old advanced cars like this, where they were doing the same kind of thing, but then having performers that were on the road would just add that extra color and that extra pizzazz to the whole experience.
Oh, cool. Here's just a shot of the flat cars on the circus train that would have carried the piggybacks or the carts or what have you. Here's another shot unloading. Yeah, look. Oh, look, an elephant. Obviously, now we're getting into a more modern area. We got steel cars instead of wood and so on. Well,
and if you look at that too, so that's like you were saying, that's the new era of the stock cars. So in one of the videos that you'll actually share later on, they actually go into the stock cars and kind of talk about them and show them off. But you can see you have the AC units up on top. There's all these windows. There's misters built in there inside those cars. So they would have AC for the animals. They'd have misters spraying cold water on them if it got a little warm or whatever. And so these cars were custom-made suites for the elephants, but then also for the horses that traveled on the road as well. And then there were sometimes llamas or goats or other animals that would travel in the stocks as well. And so each stock car was custom-made for those animals and equipped to treat them as the divas that they were. I mean, we used to call the elephants the divas of the circus, and people would laugh, and we're like, no, I'm serious. They're the divas of the circus. They're taken care of better than the performers are, and we're taken care of like royalty. So just imagine how they're taken care of.
It looks like this is shaping up to form a parade, huh?
Yeah, that is probably them unloading them from the stocks and then getting them all lined up, and then they're going to get ready to go. And actually, you can see the hay on their backs of the elephants. The elephants would take the hay with their trunks and just throw it in the air and throw it on their back to kind of cool themselves down. It's a natural behavior that they have. And so they would come off of the stock cars and kind of do that because they knew they were going to be walking for a while. So they'd kind of throw it on their back to help cool themselves down before they'd start walking. But it was something that the elephants did. It wasn't somebody getting them to do it. They did it themselves.
And just here's at least one other kind of animal. I had to throw that in.
The camel.
A camel, yeah. Obviously, a much older picture with the back to wooden boxcars. Here's a picture of taking some of those rolling. Well, not in this case. It's not animal cages, but it's equipment trailers, I assume.
Well, and you'll see a little bit further down the picture, way at the very far end. There actually are a few of the traveling the cat cages for either the tigers or the lions that might have been on the show. But yeah, these are the wagons, the wagons that house the props, floats. There's also the rigging for trapeze and all that kind of stuff will be all in these boxes. And then the Harlan, the guy is pulling this with a Harlan, which you see Harlans at airports, pulling all the baggage carts and stuff. And so that was the same kind of vehicle that we used on the circus to be able to haul these. And they would haul them wherever the flat cars would park. They would haul these wagons from those flat cars all the way to the arena. So it could be a few miles away, and they would haul them all that way, which again just shows the efficiency, why the military wanted to watch the efficiency of loading and unloading and moving a circus from one city to the other, because even though there was that distance from the flats to the arena, they did it in a very time-efficient way that they were able to have everything there ready to go and set up. And the show happened at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, and by golly, it was happening at 7 o'clock on Wednesday.
Wow. Oh, here's your parade.
Yeah. So there, and so you can see there's the stock cars right there where they just unloaded all the animals, and then they walk them from the stock cars up the road to the arena. And I can't really tell which city this is. Sometimes I can from the background, but it was probably maybe less than a mile away, so not that far. But as you can see, there's all these spectators on the side watching the animals come to town. So it's not as big of a parade as it used to be with all the floats and everything, but it still was something that many people would talk about, that they came out as kids, then they brought their kids out, and then they brought their grandkids out. It was just a lasting tradition that every time the circus came to town, they would come to watch the animal walk and watch the elephants walking down their street going to the circus.
And that headdress on the elephants, that's the one that you have in your office, right?
Sort of. This is the newer. This is the newer logo that they created later, at the later part of the circus. The one that I have up here is probably from is one of the later ones from the 90s to probably early 2000s, and then around mid 2000s is when they changed to the newer logo. When they were sprucing up the show and creating new elements with video and lighting and other kind of things, they redid the logo to have a more modern feel. So the one that I have up here on the wall right there is the older globe type look than what you see here on their heads. But it's the same thing though. It's the headpiece that they actually wear on their head. And actually, the cool thing with the headdress, too, which many people don't know because you never get up that close to it, is you have the headpiece with the big logo, but all those little silver circles that you see are all miniature little buttons of the Greatest Show on Earth logo. So the logo that you see up there on the headpiece, every one of those is the same logo, but in silver.
Wow.
Yeah, so custom-made elephant headpieces.
This is an interesting shot I ran into. Obviously, a Circus Train car. I'm not sure what kind, but this is not the crew of the circus. This is a model railroad club that got to tour a Circus Train somewhere along the line. I don't know exactly where or when, but there's a video of this in the links that will be on the page that you can watch their tour.
Looking at that car is probably the stock car, not the animal stock car, but the train crew actually has a car where they have all their electrical cords and all their equipment and all the things that they need to upkeep the train year round, and so that's probably that stock car with all the stuff in it. I'd say it was a generator car, but the generator car doesn't have double doors on both sides, but you can see there's a door here where this gentleman's sitting, and then you can see the opening on the other side, which means there's a double door on the other side.
Oh, yeah.
And the generator car only had one door on one side, so it's probably the stock car where they have all their supplies, the maintenance car.
Just to keep this talk a little bit local to San Luis Obispo, here's the circus arriving in San Luis Obispo in the 1940s and 50s. Unfortunately, I couldn't find a picture of the train at the station, but this is the walk, the ballyhoo parade. Is that what you called it?
The ballyhoo.
Ballyhoo, going down Monterey Street. I'm not quite sure. And thanks to the History Center, San Luis Obispo History Center, for sharing these pictures with us. The circus was in San Luis Obispo in, let's see, April of 48, May of 49, and May of 1950. Those are the three times that I could find, anyway, that the circus came to town in San Luis Obispo. And I think, Kelly, you said you saw the circus or one of the other circuses in town more your 1980s.
Yeah, the smaller shows that travel around that you see that go around, that kind of like what we were talking about, Circus Vargas and Circus Vasquez and those. Circus Vargas is an actual, it's based in California, so it's an actual California type circus. They kind of will go east a little ways to maybe Nevada, but they don't go too far past Nevada. They really stay West Coast, and they primarily stay in California. And so when I was a kid, I don't know if my parents or my grandparents were the ones that took us, but we went to see the circus in Pismo Beach, and which is surprising. I saw a clown there, and he terrified me to death. Yet then I became a clown, so it's just very weird. It's like, how is that possible? But yeah, so Circus Vargas came through, and they actually still do come through. Circus Vargas plays actually at Madonna Inn in the big field right there next to Madonna Inn. They set up the circus every year, and they're there for about a week and a half, I think. So if you're driving by at some point during the year and you see a circus tent up, that's probably Circus Vargas. They're doing their show at Madonna Inn.
Wow. Here's a shot I stumbled upon of the circus train going through the Tehachapi Loop. I figured all the railroader types who would be joining us today would get a kick out of that.
Yeah, and the fun thing, kind of like what you and I had been talking about when we visited earlier, was the fact that on the circus, there were two things that we always looked forward to, or actually three. Let's go with three. One of them was the time that the circus trains would pass each other. There was 1 or 2 times a year that we played cities that were very close to each other, so the trains would actually pass right next to each other on the rails. So we would see the other train, the red or the blue unit train going past us. But then another one was the Tehachapi Loop, which was on the West Coast. And so we look forward to this because the train would actually go underneath itself. So if you were in the prime location on the circus train, you literally could be above the train as you were going over as it goes under through the tunnel. So there was that one. And then in Pennsylvania, on the East Coast, there was the Horseshoe Curve, the very famous Horseshoe Curve, where it comes into the canyon, and it really, the canyon, the tracks are kind of like a horseshoe, where it comes through, loops around, and then goes back out the same kind of way. And so if you're out on the vestibule watching, you would literally see the other half of the train, maybe 100 yards on the other side from you, going around. And so these were always the things that people would always run out to the vestibules or know it was coming. And they would make announcements on the radio, too, on the train going, hey, we're going to be going past the Tehachapi Loop or the Horseshoe Curve in about 20 minutes, so get ready. And everybody would run out onto the vestibules and get their cameras out and get ready because it was a big thing.
And here, speaking of a big thing, this is as close as I ever got really to a circus train in 2011 when the circus train came through San Luis Obispo. They did not stop. It's a long story. They were supposed to have stopped, but they were running late. They ended up doing all the crew change and animal watering and all that sort of stuff down south of here somewhere. I don't even remember now where, but
Jamie, actually, this picture right here actually is a good segue into something that you might be talking about later, which is the stock cars and where they're placed in the lineup of the circus train, where you can see the engines are right here, and the 4 or 5 stock cars are right behind the engines. It's because that's less torque. Where when the train would take off or slow down, that's where the least amount of give and shakiness or jolting would happen. So they would always make sure that the stock cars, where the animals were the closest to the engines. Because again, we would travel all around the United States, and so as we would move from one track to the next, it would designate who the engine was by what track it was owned by, like Santa Fe or those kind of rail lines. And so some of the people that were the engineers of the train did freight, but they never actually did passenger cars. So they didn't realize you got to be a little softer when you're attaching to the train, or when you take off, you have to be a little smoother. And they would just take off like freight trains. But imagine it's a mile-long train, and so from the very beginning, it's a little bit of torque and a little bit of jolting, but as that ripple effect goes on, when you get down to the 40th car, it's now like an earthquake in California, and things are falling off the shelves. You're rolling out of your bed, and so that's why they would put the stock cars so close, so that would never be anything the animals would have to deal with. It was the people on the other end of the train that had to deal with all those repercussions of a freight engineer pulling the train.
Wow. There's some more of the train coming through. This is just a couple of 3 shots. I forgot how many of this train coming through. There's someone in the train. They got a kick out of waving at people. And there were a few people trackside watching this happen.
That was the fun thing about riding on the circus train, too, is that you would go through areas that, you probably would never see or ever see again. And you could just go out there onto the vestibule, the space between the train cars, and open up the top part of the door and pull out a lawn chair or a stool and just sit there and watch the countryside go by. Or we'd go through cities, and when you'd go through cities, there would be people waving to you and saying, hello, because, again, the side of the train says the greatest show on earth, Ringley Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. There's no denying who you are. And so people in the towns would just love seeing you. And yeah, you'd see people waving to you and holding up signs saying, "We're so happy to see you," and taking pictures. And yeah, I mean, it was great. It was just amazing to see that. Well, like, here you go, people taking pictures.
Speaking of taking pictures, yeah, there was quite a few people on that walkway up to the pedestrian bridge, and there were even more people on the pedestrian bridge, and there were even more people up on the station platform, which is just north of this photo. Everybody in St. Louis knows where the station is related to the freight house, which you see in the picture. And that was loaded with people, too. They were hoping to see a lot more than just the thing fly by, but
yeah, they were hoping for maybe a designated stop.
Yeah. This was, it was just a happenstance thing. I was on the back end of a Amtrak train on a private car. We had gone down there for a railroad convention or something in San Diego. And while we were sitting there in the San Diego station, this is 2015, the circus train went by. I couldn't believe it. So, ran out, missed half the train just because I didn't know it was coming.
So Jamie, this car is number 50. And that video that I sent you yesterday that my friend found of the abandoned circus train cars that are in North Carolina.
Oh, yeah?
One of those cars is car number 50, because as the guy's walking past, you'll see the number, and I think the number was 55, which means that the lineup of cars, that means that car 50 was probably in that bunch. So one of these cars that you see here is the same cars that the North Carolina DOT purchased and then never used. And so the cars are just sitting abandoned on a rail line somewhere in North Carolina.
Yeah, for those of you who will hunt for these links after they're posted, look for a title that actually has the word "abandoned" in it, and that's the video that Kelly is just talking about, and apparently has this car. Amazing. And here's the only other shot I got that was worth anything. As the tail end of the train, you can see by the end of train marker there at the back end of that flat car. That was it. It happened too fast to get too much. And it was at night. I wasn't ready for night either. Okay, so here, Kelly, we start your section of stuff. And to do that, we threw in this picture of Kelly in Colorado Springs. Yay! With Pikes Peak in the background, you can almost see it there. It's pretty faint. But you can certainly see that the circus train is in the background. So anything you want to add to this picture, Kelly, before we move on?
Well, I think this picture really designates kind of how the circus train was in most cities. I mean, there were some cities that we were in a train yard out in the middle of nowhere, but there were many times that the circus train was on a track that was very near a park or a neighborhood, or like this had. There's the park here, right behind me, with this little pond with the fountain. Right on the other side of the train is the interstate. So we're right there. I mean, we're right smack dab in the middle of Colorado Springs, and so that's kind of how it was when the circus train would come to town. The train would park somewhere, and one out of 3 times we were in a great location like this, and so it was like, our apartment came to town, and here's our little town without a zip code parked in your town for a week. And again, it's great promotion. You see Ringley Brothers and Barnum Bailey Circus on the side of that train. It's promoting the circuses in town. And when people see that, they then look for where the circus is, or look for, advertisements of where's the circus performing.
I love the description of a city without a zip code. That's exactly right. It's a mile long and 20, 30, whatever width of a rail car is.
Yeah.
That's what did you call it? The Silver Snail?
The Silver Snail, yeah. And a town without a zip code because, the circus had over 300 people that worked on it, and more than 2/3 of those people lived on that train. So it really, truly was a town without a zip code because the amount of people that lived on there. And each car, it wasn't exactly the same. So each car was designated a different way. Some cars had 10 rooms. Some cars had 10 rooms with a kitchenette at the end. Some cars had 5 rooms, and the rooms were bigger. Or then you got to the private cars at the very end, which the public cars actually had a hallway that would go from one end of the train all the way up to the other. So you could literally walk 30 cars from one end to the other and just walk from one international zone to the next. You could be in Europe, and then 3 cars later you're in Mexico, 3 cars later you're in China, 3 cars later you're in South America, and so it really was an international tour. But then you get to the private cars, which were at the very far end, and the private cars there was no hallway because you had the full width of the train car. So you had a vestibule at either end, and then you had a vestibule in the middle, and those were the only ways to get to those rooms. And so when you had those rooms, you had the privacy of just hanging out and chilling out in your room on the train runs, which was good but also bad. I mean, if you wanted to hang out with other people, you wouldn't be able to do that. But for me, I got one of the private cars when I became boss clown on the circus for my last 3 years. And by that point, I was happy to have my isolation for 3 days. I was like, I want to be in my private room all by myself and reading and drawing and watching movies and stuff. There you go. Now that actually is not my private car. That actually 189 was the clown car for the circus on the blue unit, which you can actually designate the globe on the side of the train car is blue. For the red unit, it was actually red. So that's how you could always tell which train was going through the town or there, as you'd see the globe, and the globe would tell you what color it was. But 189 was the clown car, which is where most of the clowns lived, and we had 12 rooms in there, 2 bathrooms, there was a shower unit, there was a washer dryer, and at the far end, we actually had a kitchenette, which had an oven and cabinets and all that. And then the rooms themselves actually had they had refrigerators. So you'd store your refrigerated stuff in there, but then you'd store all your cabinet stuff, your non-perishable foods and your plates and all the cookware and stuff in the kitchen and your cabinets that you had. And then people coming to visit the circus. This is Mark Brady, who Mark and his wife Diana were. Diana was our assistant pastor at the First United Methodist Church in Arroyo Grande when I was still living there before I joined the puppet tour. And but as ministers, so she was on the Pacific Coast, and then Mark was actually a minister on the East Coast. So they would flip flop back and forth, where she would get appointed somewhere and be there for a while, then they would go back to the East Coast, and he would be somewhere for a while, so it was just a back and forth. So they had moved to Maine, and they were in Maine. So this is them. After I joined the show, they came to visit the show. Actually, no, it wasn't Maine. It was Connecticut. They came to visit. But yeah, so I would have people that I knew when I would be on the road would come and visit the Circus Train, and so I'd show them around and take them around and give them a tour. Many people from my church days, from the puppet troupe and the youth ministry, when I'd come through California, would come visit, and then family would come visit, and then family friends that we knew. So yeah, so it was always a fun thing to show the home away from home.
That's kind of a lousy picture of the people you would attract.
There's a great water tower.
That's fun though. But look at that. Give the elephants a bath.
That's what they love. They love, and they really do. It's funny when it's bath time and they pull out the hoses and spray them down. They love it. They get out there, they soak up the water and spray it in the air. They trumpet and just they have the most fun. And it's so funny to watch the elephants get their baths.
And there's the obviously the red group, right? The red unit.
You got it, because of the logo color.
I'm catching on.
But and this is another animal walk that you see right there with all the elephants lined up moving around.
Yeah, yeah. And this, I think, is a setup, getting ready for a show, right?
Yeah. So this is, we were talking about when I was talking about Steve Smith earlier, and I was talking about winter quarters. This is actually Tampa, the fairgrounds in Tampa. Where we would actually, for many, many years, would do our winter quarters, which winter quarters, if you ever saw the movie The Greatest Show on Earth, where when the movie first starts and Charlton Heston comes in and they're getting everything ready and putting things onto the train and getting ready to head out, that was their winter quarters in Sarasota. Well, in Tampa, we would be here at the fairgrounds, and this is where we would come in and we would work on and rehearse the new show that was going to go out for a 2-year tour. So we had just finished a 2-year tour, came back and spent the month of December working on this new show that the production team had been working on all year round, getting it ready. So we were learning the new choreography, learning the new bits, learning the flow of the show. The new props were built and brought out, and then our costumes were made. So we'd start wearing our costumes. And so this is the practice, which is why you see these performers are just wearing street clothes. They're not wearing any costumes because their costumes are still being made. So this is them just rehearsing all their choreography for one of the parts of the show. And then, and this is probably pretty far on, looking at props and stuff that are in the shot. So this probably was the third week, and so this is going into the final week of rehearsals before the show opened in Tampa the first week of January. And then Gene Pettis.
Yeah, well, I'll let you talk about it, but the fact that there's a train master on this train, and this is him, Gene, what's his last name?
Gene Pettis.
Gene Pettis. He's responsible for the train, and I'll let you take it from there, Kelly, if you want to add it.
Well, actually, before I talk about Gene, so that image earlier that had the model train people in it, and you weren't sure who exactly they were, so that car, this is the interior that I was kind of talking about, where you see all like the ladders and the extension cords and all that stuff there. This is what the interior of that car that they were all standing outside of, that's what it looks like inside. But yeah, Gene Pettis. So the circus train actually had a train master, and the train master was the one who essentially was in charge of the train. You had the general manager who was in charge of the circus and the entirety of the circus. So they were in charge of everything that was circus. But then you had a production manager who was in charge of the production aspect of the show. And then you had an operation manager who was in charge of the operation portion, dealing with the building and all the union people and things that might go into us coming into an arena. But then you had the train master who was in charge of the circus train. And they had porters who were the people that worked for them, that did all the maintenance work and everything on the train. But Gene Pettis actually came with a train background. He actually was a train engineer for many, many years. And so when he retired, he came to the circus and joined the circus. And his daughter was actually the head electrician, and that's actually why he got brought on, is they knew they needed a train master. And so she was like, hey, my dad just retired from the rails, and maybe he'll come out. So he and his wife came out, and he was train master for all my years that I was on the blue unit before I moved to the red unit. But his vast knowledge of trains really helped out because he knew the inner workings of a train and moving a train from one city to the next. And if there was a problem, he knew how to fix it, and he knew how to fix it quickly. Because again, if you have 300 plus people living on the circus train and AC goes out or water heaters go out or something happens, your Donaker's not working, you got to get that fixed quick. And so having that knowledge really helped out. So Gene was a very valuable asset to the circus, as every train master was, because they were the ones who kept our home and kept it working perfectly. So
your town, really.
So yeah, so really a big job, but I mean, we were very thankful to have them there. It's me. Look at me. Look at me. That's what is that? That's 10 years ago, maybe more than that. I don't know. Yeah, that is actually from pre-show, which on the circus, many people might not know this if you've never been to the circus before, but the circus, you have the main show, but then you would have in the older days, it used to be called come in, where the audience would come in and sit down in the stands, but then the clowns would come out and perform little clown gags on the track around the arena floor in front of certain sections of the audience. But then they created in the late 90s, they created something called the Adventure, which was the hour before the show began, where they actually opened the arena floor to the audience. So if you came an hour early, you could come down to the arena floor and meet the performers, try on costumes, watch circus acts, and see things up close, and then also get autographs and take pictures, which it was great. But this right here really emphasizes one of the things that hate is such a bad word, and I don't like using the word hate, but we really strongly disliked this part, which was people would come up and want autographs, but we had things that we had to do. We had gags or performances that we had to do for the pre-show, but we would have people coming up left and right wanting autographs, and we're like, okay, I'll give you an autograph once I'm done, but I got to go into the ring right now. No, you have to sign my book. No, I will, but I got to go in there. I'm paying your salary because I bought a ticket price, so you got to sign my book. And it was that kind of stuff where you would learn how to snake around that to get to the arena ring to be able to perform and do your stuff, and so it was tricky, but as seasoned professionals, we learned how to do it. But yeah, the autographs were great, but it got to the point that it was like people just wanted the autograph. They didn't want to see up close what was going on. They'd just rather have an autograph and then go find somebody else to sign their book. So it was those tricky ways to pull them to your performance space to watch you work. It's the trick or treat, Okay, you watch my trick, and then I'll give you the treat of the autograph afterwards. There's a little Halloween tie-in. You see how that worked?
Speaking of seasoned professional.
Not my hair.
Tell us about what's going on here.
So the gentleman, first of all, with the newspaper wrapped around his head is Lane Vernardos. Lane Vernardos was the dad of Kevin Vernardos, who was the ringmaster of Ringley for many years, and who now, I would say already, but now has his own traveling show called the Vernardo Circus. Amazing one-ring show where he started doing shows just in fairgrounds and little pop-up areas, and now has his own circus tent. He goes around and sets it up just like any other circus, but it's a circus of dreams, and it really stems from Kevin joining Ringling Brothers as a Broadway performer. He had just graduated from Ithaca College and was wanting to be a Broadway performer, and then got on the circus, and then got bit by the circus bug. But his dad was a producer for CBS, so produced Survivor and other shows like that. And Lane loved circus trains, and he loved trains in general. He loved model trains. He loved real trains. So when Kevin joined the show and he knew that Kevin was on the Silver Snail, he's like, I'm coming out to visit. I'm going to come out and travel with you occasionally, and I want to travel on the train. So he did, and he actually created a few video series called the Circus Train Adventures that he would make these videos and then give them out to all the performers, and then I think they're now on YouTube, which you actually might have one of those that you'll link later on. But he would film with his camera and then go back home and edit on his editing setup, and then make these great videos. But he would capture not only the travel on the rail, but he would capture the life of the circus. The behind the scenes aspects, and here's the spectacle of on the arena floor, but here's other aspects of what goes on backstage and life on the circus. And one of those things was on your birthday. It was a tradition that goes back many, many years that you would get pied. The circus pieing. And, it could be a pie shell with a pie inside of it, or it could be various other things. Now, on the circus, you don't use a real pie because a real pie is too thick and too hard. You use shaving cream because shaving cream, actually the consistency of a shaving cream holds up and won't, like if you use whipped cream because of the dairy base will melt in a matter of minutes. But with shaving cream, it won't melt. It'll just hold its form. And so we would take plates, or we take pie shells, or in this case we take newspapers and put the shaving cream inside of it, and it was the element of a sneak attack. And when I first joined the circus, John Weiss, who was the human cannonball at the time on the circus, he was a clown and a cannonball all at once. He was a long-time clown on Ringling, went to clown college. He was the birthday pie clown. But then when he left, he said to me, I'm going to train you, and you're going to become the pie clown. And so I stepped in and learned all of his tricks. And so I then started pieing people for the remainder of my years on the blue show before I went to the red. And this is one of the ways you could do it, where you take the shaving cream and put it inside of a newspaper and then close it up. Now, it's in the very center of the paper, but nobody knows there's shaving cream in there. So you can come out reading the newspaper or talking about it. So here I was telling Lane that there was an article about Kevin in the newspaper, and it was a great article. And I was like, did you see it? He's like, no, I didn't see it. I'm like, how did you not see it? It's like, oh, okay, well, let me find it. So I'm flipping to find the shaving cream. He doesn't know it's coming because he doesn't know there's anything inside there. And when I got to the middle of the page, I just flipped the paper and put it right in his face, and then he got birthday pied. And so it was Kevin who set him up because it was his birthday, and Kevin wanted his dad pied by the circus pieing clown, and so that's what we did. And they got it all on video and everything. And so, again, it's a tradition. There's many traditions on the circus, and that's just one of them that really carried on all the way through the very end. When I left, somebody else took it over, and then somebody took it over from them, and it just kept going, where the clowns were the birthday pieing clowns. And if it was your birthday, you would hide, or you would do whatever you could not to get pied, but rest assured, before the end of the night, you would get pied.
Speaking of pies, tell us about the pie car.
So the pie car, actually, it's pretty cool. If you look at it, the picture you see in the black and white image is pretty much the same that it was in later years too. That same kind of setup where it was booths, kind of like a diner. But what the pie car was is it was the dining car on the circus train, and it was right in the very middle of the public cars. So there were 14 cars on one side and 15 cars on the other side, and then the pie car right in the middle. And on train runs, it was open 24 hours a day. So you could come there at any point during the train run and get food if you wanted to. There was always a cook in the kitchen. But then when the train would actually get spotted and placed in town, then there were actually hours to the pie car, just like any restaurant. But it was a place to gather. As you can see behind Oscar, Oscar's the clown here. Behind Oscar, there's all these people. It was a place to gather and get together and socialize. On train runs, people would come down there and play cards or play games, board games. They just come down there just to socialize and visit, to get out of their rooms. But it's kind of like a parlor car that you would see on other trains where you would go and watch the countryside go by. This was the gathering place to get together and hang out and watch countryside go by and visit with your friends and get a great meal. And most of the chefs that were hired by Ringley Brothers were gourmet chefs. The guy that was on when I was on the Blue Show, his mom was a 5-star gourmet chef in New Orleans. So she worked at these big resorts and fancy restaurants, and so he learned from her. So when Mike Vaughn was cooking in the kitchen and you knew he was cooking that day, you would come in because you knew it was going to be some gigantic gourmet meal, because he was just I'm going to have a little, I'm going to experiment and see what I can come up with. And you knew whatever his experimenting was going to do, it was going to be amazing. So
you talked about a little bit, Kelly, earlier about the fact that all these train cars, particularly the stock cars and specialty use ones, were custom made. And here's just a picture of a couple pictures of repurposing existing rail cars into circus cars. And I read somewhere, as this upper right-hand photo says, that it took about 9,000 man-hours to completely recycle one train car into a circus train car. And then up in the upper right-hand corner, you can see 3 guys ripping up the floor, the demo stage, I guess you'd say, of transforming an old rail car or a different rail car into a circus car.
Well, they used to actually call it gutting, which is like,
well,
I guess the people that used to do it used to fish as well. I don't know. But, yeah, what they would do is they would actually get these rail cars from Amtrak or other Pullman cars, and they would get in there and they would completely gut the car. So they would hollow it out and then come back in and then build the rooms, the schematics to whatever they were needing. And then once the new car was essentially recycled and remodeled, it would then go out on the road, and they would take the car that it was replacing and then bring it back. And this is all done in Florida at the Feld Entertainment headquarters. They actually had a department for the train restorations, and so they would bring the train cars there, do all the work, and then, like I said, just cycle them through, where one new car would go out, and then 1 or 2 cars would come off the road and either get fixed up or remodeled or whatever. But yeah, they would get gutted completely and then put back together. And I think in one of the videos that you're going to share, that you're going to link to, I think there's a section on that where you can kind of see them, and they'll talk about the remodeling and fixing of that.
Yeah. And here's just insides of one of the stock cars.
Yeah, so here's the alpacas that are traveling on the road, and this is just one of their many pens inside the stock car, so they can move from here to the next pen and stuff, and just move around freely in there. And again, it's right behind the engine, so there's really no jostling or anything for them. So it's a nice smooth ride, and as you can see, plenty of alfalfa pellets and hay for them to eat and nosh on. And there were always handlers back there with them. 24/7 during train runs that were cleaning the pens and feeding them and making sure everything was great and fine. And there was actually a vet on the circus as well, a fully trained vet that would actually come out on the road and live full time on the road. And so there was always a vet there in case any of the animals had issues, got sick or whatever. There was always that vet to help out.
And how about the sleeper?
So this is, again, like we were talking about, the different sized rooms. This room right here is actually part of the private cars, and so it's a much bigger room. And here you can see there's a couch, but then you can look right out the windows and you see countryside going by. Above his head, there's cabinets up there for storage. Off to the side, there's little shelves, and the refrigerator's probably over there, but it's a private car, so from one side of the train to the other. So that means they have windows here. They turn around. There's windows on the other side of their room as well. Where in the public cars that have the hallway going through the hall or going through the train, you had windows only on one side because the other side was the wall because the hallway was there. And then so the picture on the left-hand side is my private room. Which was it was a quarter car of the private cars, and so I had a full-size fridge, a full-size oven, had my own sink, I had my own washer-dryer unit, there's a full-size closet, I had a queen-size bed in the room, I had my own bathroom with the shower and toilet and all that. So it was much bigger. And then the picture with the corgi is actually a picture of the production manager's room. Production manager was a friend of mine, and so that's his room that he had with his wife. And it's a different kind of kitchen setup where the fridge is where it is, and then the oven is on right in front of the fridge. Then off to the side of the fridge, underneath the paper towels, is the sink. And so just a little bit different, same sized room, just a little bit different setup. But again, both these rooms are the privates, so we had the full width of the train car. In Hershey, Pennsylvania. Look at that. One of the best smelling train yards ever.
I just happened to have a Hershey chocolate.
It was great. The funny thing, so when you're in Hershey, you knew when they were making all the cocoa stuff because you could smell the smell of chocolate in the air. When you were in Boston, we parked at MIT. The MIT campus had a train line, and that's where the circus train would park. It parked right next to the Necco wafer factory of Necco wafer fame. And so when we were parked there, you could smell what they were making, and you could smell the flavor. So you knew what flavor of Necco wafers they were making that day, because they would only make one batch of like the chocolate or the grape or the peppermint. But you could literally smell the smell out of that Necco wafer factory of what the wafers were. So here in Hershey, you could smell the smell of chocolate in the air. And all the street lights, no, you can't really see any street lights, but the street lights in Hershey are all Hershey Kisses.
I think actually there is one right there.
Yeah. So if you got close enough, you'd see it's a Hershey Kiss. It's the funniest thing, but yeah.
And then for the rail fans in the group, you might notice that blue caboose is a Conrail car, which I won't go into all about what made up Conrail, but there is one. Kids in the classroom.
Kids in the classroom, because you got families on the road, and that's one thing. Actually, if people watch the video with the abandoned train car, the gentleman who's doing the little walk through of the train actually mentions the families, and he sees one of the bigger rooms, and he goes, "Yeah, there's a bigger room here." Well, that's because I heard there's families on the circus, and that's true. On the circus. Again, you have that many people, there's going to be families. There's going to be husbands and wives with their kids, and there's generational families. The performers are generational. So there's, fifth or sixth generation. So grandma and mom and dad and the kids are all performers in the circus. And so you're traveling 11 months out of the year with the circus, but there's still education that's still there. And so the kids, the circus kids, actually had school, and there were trained teachers that came and lived on the circus, and that was their job, to be the teachers on the circus. And they would teach from first grade all the way up to 12th grade, and they would teach all that curriculum, very much based off the homeschool curriculum that's out there. But they would teach these kids, and the kids would come and have their school time, and kids would graduate. There were many kids that during my 7 years, they went through 12th grade, and then they graduated, and then they went off and went off to college, or they stayed on the road and became performers as well. But many of them would get that education, that graduation, and then move off and go off and do college, and then move off into another career that wasn't circus, or maybe come back as management and do the business side of things. But it was amazing. And there was also a nursery too, where if you had a family that had a newborn or a very young child who couldn't go to school, there was a nursery. And so as mom and dad were out performing the trapeze, the kids were in the nursery hanging out with their friends, and then after mom and dad were done with their act, they'd come back and get the kid, take their child back to their dressing room for a while, or just leave their child in the nursery and let them play in there for the show, because they knew they had to go back out to do a few more things in the show later on. So truly, I mean, it was family entertainment, but it was also family too. It was definitely that family feel where you had youngsters, and you had grandparents, and you had everybody just running around, and when there were birthdays, we celebrated birthdays like this one right here. Nice. And when Halloween, we're on Halloween today. On Halloween, again, we would dress up in our outfits to perform the show. So on Halloween, we'd have a show. We're in costumes. So it was always the big thing on Halloween that once the show is over, we would get one of the party rooms at the arena, and we would have a Halloween party, and all the performers could get dressed up in their own Halloween costume, and we'd have a little circus Halloween party, because it was a chance to get into our costumes after the show was over. And I think every year that I was on the show, maybe there was one year that didn't happen, but every year that I was on the show, somebody in the show wanted to be me, and they would come to me and go, "Can you put your clown face on me, and can I wear your outfit?" And so every year I was in the clown parties, not me, because I was dressed as something else, but there was somebody dressed up like me in clown at these parties every year, because somebody wanted to be me. And it was funny, but it's like, all right. But then look at this picture though. So these kids, like there's some of them, like Vaughn, who has the green plaid with the red hair on top. He was a little kid when I first joined, and I saw him grow up. He was like a little brother to me. I saw him grow up, and then he went off and was a solo clown on the Gold Show for a while. Then he came back, and now he actually works in a pirate stunt show in Pigeon Forge, and doesn't work circus anymore, but still utilizes all the routines and the skills that he had as a performer. And then some of the other girls that are over here on the side have now grown up, and they went off to college, and so again, they were raised on the circus and did the circus, but then they graduated, and when they graduated, then they went off and got a college education, and now are doing other things. And it's just one of those, it's life. Circus is life, but it's also it prepares you for the real world. So when you're ready to step out and do your other stuff, you can. There's Snake River right there. I know where the trees are, Snake River, and I think the other one is too. It's northern California going into Oregon, and just this is a great example of truly the landscapes that the circus train would go through. There's no roads where this is going. It's this train track, the mountain on one side and a river on the other, and nothing else. And so you go through areas that nobody has ever seen unless they were on the train. And we'd go through New Mexico or Utah areas where it was just train tracks and then open nothingness. And it was just so cool. Like New Mexico was like you were going through an Old West movie, the plateaus and the run-on, just deserts that went on for miles and miles and miles. And, it was just you, the train, and this open nature that God made that was just phenomenal to see. And then you get here where you're going right through the booming metropolis of San Diego beaches. Which, again, and this was, as you all know with California, the Amtrak line goes right along the coast, from San Diego up into Santa Barbara, up into Santa Maria, San Luis Obispo area before you get to San Luis, and then it cuts inland. But this is how the train would go. From L.A. down to San Diego, it would take that track right along the California coast. So you'd go past beaches and all those many people out there, enjoying the sunny weather, surfing, and then they look and there's a circus train.
Okay, actually that gets us to the end. Let me see if I can switch this back to not sharing the screen, and let's see if we can also unmute everybody to see if anybody might have questions. Are you open for questions, Kelly?
I'm open. Are you open for my answers?
So anybody, if you want to ask a question, here's your chance.
I'll jump in at once.
Or you can use the chat feature too. We have one person who chatted for you, Kelly. Thanks very much. It was really fun and interesting.
Well, thank you, Jamie, for bringing me on.
I loved it.
A very weird and random, email from you. Hey, so I'm doing a circus thing. You wanna talk about the circus train? Why not? Why not? That sounds like fun to me.
So can we talk to them? Sure. Oh.
Okay, let me go back to sharing just a second, the screen that is, to let you know. Oh, wait a minute, did I do it right? Didn't do it right.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so do you miss the circus? Is it the kind of life, like, it looks like it would be lots of fun, but obviously it's work. So now that it's over, do you miss it?
Aspect of it. 7 years, I gave myself the I gave myself a game plan that in 7 years I would try to accomplish everything that I wanted to do. So being on the show, and then being in a clown routine in the show, and then being a more veteran clown in the show, and then having my face on advertising. That was all stuff that I kind of laid out, and I did accomplish all that, so I was happy with that. But I do miss aspects. I truly miss traveling on the train, because the train really was just a magical experience of traveling from city to city and just seeing the countryside go by. I miss performing in front of the audiences of 15,000 to 20,000 people, and performing with my fellow performers, and just knowing that what we were doing was bringing happiness and joy to those people. But there were times that, it's 11 months, and in 11 months doing the same show and moving and traveling so much, my wife, Becky, always laughs at the fact that I can go to a city that I've performed in before, and I still know where the bank is, the grocery store, the post office, because those were the places that we had to go when we came to a town. And so she laughs about that, but it's funny that those are the things that I remember. And so when I came off the road, I was really happy with the fact that I could have a new grocery store and a new post office, and I could have my car and go wherever I wanted to go, and try new things. Because for 7 years I was the same clown, and I wanted to venture out and try new performing. And so now I work at one of the things I do is I work at a murder mystery theater. My wife and I do in Grapevine, Texas. And we actually do a murder mystery on Friday and Saturday nights. It's a Western murder mystery, so it's an 1880s style Western kind of murder mystery where the city marshal is the one trying to figure it all out, and then you have the suspects. But we actually have the Grapevine Vintage Railroad right across the street from us. And so we've done a lot of things with them with our murder mystery. But then I also work with the clown program at the local children's hospital doing clowning there. And then I have my own clowning that I do as well. So I miss aspects of the circus, but there's a lot of things that really the circus opened the door for me to be able to do a lot of things that I wasn't going to be able to do on the circus. But truthfully, to answer the question, Kurt, I mean, really, it's the circus is, you know, the memories I hold so fond are that circus train and living on it and traveling cross country back and forth on that train was just magical.
Any other questions? Well, thanks a million, Kelly. This really was fun. I can't say enough how much I appreciate you joining us. For those of you, the next Parlor Car Chat, here's some information about that. In the lower right-hand corner, you see a picture of a World War I Davenport locomotive that has been restored to operating condition in San Luis Obispo County. And Carl Hovenitz is going to join us next Saturday, the 7th, to share the story of that locomotive with everybody here on the Parlor Car Chats. So I think that wraps it up. And thank you very much, Kelly, for joining us. And the recording of this session, as well as all the links that we talked about throughout, will be on the podcast page sometime today.
And Jamie, once again, just to thank you once again. Thanks for bringing me out, because this was, like I said, it was a special treat. Usually I do these kind of chats and it's talking about clowning or talking about other stuff. So to be able to talk about the silver snail and living on the road and the ins and outs of the circus train was a great treat. So thank you very much for bringing me out. And for everybody, the videos that Jamie's talking about, really definitely, if you have time, go on and check those out, because there's a lot of things that we hinted at and discussed here in the chat, but you'll be able to watch these videos and you'll be able to see the inside of the circus train a little bit more. You'll be able to see the inside of the stock cars where the elephants and the horses and alpacas were, and see the refurb too, and see how they would remodel those circus trains too. So a lot of great video out there that really can just highlight the things that we talked about today. But thanks again, everybody, for watching, and happy Halloween. Have a great rest of your Saturday.
Happy Halloween, Kelly.
Yeah, that was really fun.
On that note, thank you very much. We'll see you next week, and thanks again, Kelly. I loved it.